I never thought it would come down to just two of us standing on that street corner, holding signs and shouting into the wind like we were trying to convince a ghost to listen. Honestly, I thought maybe a dozen people would show up, at least some friends from the group chat or a few classmates from campus. But nope, just me and Jamie. The entire protest had shrunk down to us two. And, for whatever reason, that made the whole thing feel way more real than I expected. So, yeah, I guess I should back up a bit. This was supposed to be a rally for LGBTQ+ rights, specifically pushing for better healthcare protections in our state. The event was organized online, like most things these days, and we'd spent the last week hyping it up. I mean, the group chat was buzzing with plans, memes, and hopes that maybe this time something would actually change. I was stoked to be part of it, not just because I cared about the cause, but also because I thought it might be a chance to actually meet people who got it. People like me. Jamie was the last person I expected to see there. We met a few months ago in one of those queer study groups at the local library. He's that kind of guy who's always got this calm, steady vibe, like nothing really rattles him. Tall, a little scruffy with this easy smile that somehow made you feel like you'd known him forever after just 5 minutes. I wasn't sure if he was coming to the protest until he messaged me that morning, something like, "I'm in, see you there." Simple, no fuss. When I got to the corner of Main and 3rd, where the rally was supposed to start, the street was oddly quiet. No cheering crowds, no other signs waving in the breeze, just the two of us clutching our handmade posters. I recognized Jamie right away. He was already there, standing under a flickering street lamp that made his face look kind of cinematic in the early evening. I waved and he gave a small nod, like he was relieved. I made it. For a moment, I thought about turning back, maybe texting the group chat that it was a bust, then going home to binge watch something stupid on Netflix. But then Jamie caught my eye and shrugged, half smiling. "Guess it's just us," he said, voice low enough that I had to lean in to hear. There was something in the way he said it. Not defeat, not bitterness, but this weird mix of stubborn hope and quiet determination. It made me want to stand there longer, even if just to prove that we weren't invisible, that our voices still mattered, even if no one else showed up. So we did. We started chanting, our voices echoing between empty storefronts and late-night traffic lights. And in that moment, with the streetlights flickering and the city slowly falling asleep around us, I realized this was more than just some failed protest. It might be the start of something I hadn't expected. Something real. Something between me and Jamie. But of course, that's getting ahead of myself. Because standing there, just the two of us, felt both painfully lonely and weirdly electric at the same time. I just had no idea how much it was going to change everything. Jamie and I kept chanting for a while, our voices bouncing off those empty brick walls like we were shouting into some kind of void. It was weirdly quiet, apart from the occasional car passing by and the faint hum of distant city noise. I started to think maybe no one else was coming at all, and honestly, that pleased me. Protest or not, I had hoped there'd be a crowd, some energy, people united for the cause. Instead, it felt like we were just two dudes standing in the twilight, trying to make noise for an invisible audience. After a bit, Jamie lowered his sign and turned toward me, a little breathless but still smiling. "So," he said, "what made you actually come out tonight? I mean, besides the obvious, saving the world stuff." I laughed, rubbing the back of my neck. Honestly, partly because I needed to prove I'm not just talk. All those posts on Instagram and Twitter, but when it comes to actually showing up, I freeze. I wanted to push myself. Plus, I glanced at him. I kind of wanted to see if you were real. Jamie raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and here I thought you were just being noble." "Yeah, right," I said. I wanted to see if the guy who seems chill in the library was willing to stand in the cold with me holding a sign. It felt like the first real connection we'd had outside of that quiet study group. Up until now, we'd mostly just exchanged book recommendations and small talk about queer history. But right here, under the dull streetlight with the night wrapping around us, it felt more genuine. Jamie smiled, shaking his head. I guess I'm full of surprises. We fell into a kind of rhythm, chanting a bit, then talking, then shouting slogans again. Weirdly, the loneliness started to fade. There was something comforting about not trying to impress some big crowd or worrying if I'd sound lame. With Jamie there, it was just two people who cared, standing side by side. At some point, I noticed he was looking at me differently, not like a random acquaintance or a fellow protester, but like he was really seeing me. It made my chest tighten, but in a good way. So I said, nudging him lightly, "What's your story, Jamie? Like, why this fight? Why now?" He hesitated, then took a deep breath. Honestly, I've been scared. Scared of what would happen if I got sick and didn't have proper coverage. My family's not exactly supportive. They don't get it. So for me, this isn't just about politics. It's about survival. I nodded, feeling the weight of that confession settle between us. Yeah, I get that. I'm lucky, I guess. My folks are supportive, but sometimes it feels like the system isn't. Like we're still fighting for scraps. Jamie's expression softened. Exactly. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, like the air between us was charged with something unspoken. I wanted to say more, but the words didn't come. Instead, I just looked at him, and he looked back. Then, out of nowhere, a car slowed down nearby, window rolling down. I tensed, thinking maybe someone was about to yell at us or worse. But the guy inside just leaned over and shouted, "Hey, you two rock! Keep it up!" Jamie and I exchanged a surprised glance before laughing. That small moment felt huge, like a tiny spark in the dark. See? You never know, Jamie said, hoisting his sign back up. Even if it's just us, we're still making noise. We stayed a little longer, voices hoarse but spirits lifted. Eventually, the streetlights started flickering, and the cold crept in deeper. I could feel my fingers going numb around the cardboard handle of my sign. "Want to grab a coffee?" Jamie asked, his voice low but hopeful. I didn't hesitate. Yeah, let's get out of the cold. We walked a few blocks down to this tiny cafe that stayed open late, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and cheap espresso. Inside, the warmth hit me immediately, and so did the quiet buzz of other people who looked like they'd been out and about. Jamie ordered us 2 black coffees, and we found a corner table. Sitting there, the protest felt like a distant memory. The sign was folded awkwardly beside my bag, the adrenaline fading into a strange mix of tiredness and something else, maybe hope. So, Jamie said, stirring his coffee, "Do you think we'll do this again?" I smiled. "Hell yeah. Maybe next time more people will show up." He laughed softly. "Or maybe it'll just be us two again." I shrugged, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the coffee. I wouldn't mind. We talked for hours about everything from our favorite bands to dumb college stories to the weird ways coming out had shaped us. Somewhere between the caffeine and the conversation, I realized that the night wasn't a failure. It was the beginning of something. Whether it was a fight for change or just finding someone who understood me, I didn't know yet. But I was ready to find out. And Jamie? He didn't look like just a guy who showed up for a protest. He looked like the only person I wanted to keep showing up for. We sat in that cafe for what felt like forever, the kind of place where the dim lighting and mismatched furniture somehow made it easier to put all the walls down. Jamie was talking about his childhood, a lot of it sprinkled with stories about growing up in a small town where being openly gay was basically a death sentence socially. I could tell it was hard for him to say some of it, but he didn't shy away. It was like he needed to get it all out. When he talked about his family, the way his voice dropped a little, I could feel the weight behind the words. "They don't get me," he said bluntly. "Always trying to fix me or pretend I'm just going through a phase. I love them, but sometimes it feels like they don't love the real me." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. My family's different. They're supportive, but sometimes I get this weird guilt, like I should be grateful, but I also feel this pressure to be perfect because they're doing their part. It's exhausting. Jamie reached across the table and gave my hand a quick squeeze. We're all figuring it out, man. That simple gesture, just touching my hand, made something shift inside me. It wasn't flashy or over the top, but it was real. And suddenly, the cafe, the late nights, the protest, the cold street, it all felt like it was leading to this moment. I looked up at him and caught his eyes, those steady, calm eyes that made me forget about the noise in my head. I didn't know if he felt it too, but I wanted to find out. So I said, my voice a little shakier than I wanted, "What happens now, after tonight?" Jamie smiled, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes and makes you feel like everything's gonna be okay. We keep showing up, for the cause, for ourselves, and maybe for each other. I laughed softly. Sounds like a plan. We finished our coffees, but neither of us was in a hurry to leave. There was something grounding about just being in that quiet space with him, away from the chaos and uncertainty. When we finally stepped back out into the night, the air was colder, but the city felt different, like it was a little more alive. The walk back was easy, no awkward silences, just a comfortable kind of companionship. At one point, Jimmy reached for my hand again, this time holding it like he wasn't going to let go. And I didn't want him to. A few blocks before we reached the bus stop where we'd part ways, I stopped and looked at him. "Hey, Jamie, can I be honest?" "Always," he said, tilting his head. "I'm really glad you showed up tonight. Not just for the protest or the cause, but you. This feels different." "Good different." He smiled, cheeks flushing a little. "I was hoping you'd say that." We stood there for a moment, the city humming around us, and then he leaned in. Just a quick, gentle kiss. Nothing dramatic, but everything I didn't know I was waiting for. When we pulled apart, I felt like I was walking on air. We caught the bus together, talking quietly until our stop. And even after we said goodbye, I kept replaying that night in my head. Over the next few days, we kept texting, not just about protests or politics, but about music, movies, and the dumb little things that make life bearable. Every message from Jamie made whatever loneliness I'd felt before fade a little more. A week later, there was a new protest planned. This time, the word spread better, and more people showed up. But I kept thinking about that first night, just the two of us, standing firm when no one else would. It wasn't just about being seen. It was about finding someone who saw me. And honestly, I don't think I'll ever forget it. The second protest was a completely different vibe. We showed up early, signs in hand, and this time the street was already buzzing with people, more than I ever expected. Familiar faces from the group chat, some local activists, even a few folks from other causes who decided to join in. The energy was electric, the chants louder and more confident. It was the kind of scene that makes you believe change is actually possible. But honestly, my attention kept drifting to Jamie. The way he moved through the crowd, calm but focused. Like he belonged there but also wasn't trying too hard. He caught my eye a couple of times, and each time, it felt like a secret conversation without words. Like we were connected in a way that had nothing to do with signs or slogans. At one point, the crowd swelled, and someone handed me a megaphone. I took it with a mix of excitement and nerves, trying to keep my voice steady as I spoke about why this mattered, about the fears so many of us live with, the need for real protections, and how each of us could make a difference by showing up. When I handed it back to the organizer, Jamie was standing there, clapping softly, his eyes shining. That moment felt huge, like we were teammates in something bigger than ourselves. Afterward, we found a quiet spot near a fountain, away from the crowd. The night air was cool, but our cheeks were flushed from the excitement. "See?" Jamie said, nudging me. "This is what I was hoping for." I nodded, still riding the adrenaline. "Yeah. It's crazy how different it feels when you're not alone." He looked at me, serious for a second. "I'm really glad you came back, that night when it was just us. I thought maybe no one else cared, but you did. And you still do." My heart skipped. "I do. I think I care about more than just the cause now." Jamie smiled, his eyes softening. "Me too." We stayed there for a while, talking about everything and nothing. The city lights creating halos around us, the distant hum of late-night traffic blending with our quiet laughter. Over the next few weeks, Jamie and I started spending more time together outside of protests. Coffee dates turned into casual dinners, study sessions at the library morphed into long walks through the park. Every moment felt natural, like we were discovering something new but somehow familiar. There was this night that stands out, the one where we ended up on his couch, the city skyline glowing through the window, and he played me this playlist he'd been working on. The songs were all over the place, indie rock, some old school soul, a bit of electronic. He told me each one had a story, and as I listened, I felt like I was getting a glimpse into who he really was. I remember looking at him then, feeling this crazy mix of nerves and certainty. Like maybe, just maybe, this was what I'd been waiting for without knowing it. But it wasn't all easy. Jamie's past sometimes came up, the things he'd been through with his family, the scars that didn't show but were there. There were days when he'd get quiet or pull back a little, and I didn't know whether to give him space or hold on tighter. It scared me, because for once, I actually wanted to break through those walls instead of running away. One afternoon, we were sitting on a bench after a protest planning meeting. Jamie was fidgeting with his phone, avoiding my gaze. "Talk to me," I said gently. He sighed. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm asking too much, if I'm too broken." I shook my head, reaching out to take his hand. "You're not broken. You're fighting, surviving, and I'm here if you'll let me in." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something in his expression shifted. It wasn't a cure-all, but it was a start. There's something powerful about building something with someone who knows the fight isn't just outside in the world, but inside too. And that's what Jamie and I were doing, finding a way to be there for each other, even when it was messy or hard. I still think about that first night sometimes, the two of us standing alone, voices rising into the cold night air. What started as a tiny spark turned into a flame neither of us expected. And maybe that's the thing about love and protests. They both need people willing to show up, even when the odds are stacked against them. So, yeah, here we are. Two guys who showed up when no one else did. And somehow, that made all the difference. It's funny how the smallest moments sometimes end up meaning the most. Like, there was this one evening a few weeks after that bench conversation where everything felt both normal and a little electric at the same time. Jamie and I had just finished a smaller community meeting about the next rally, and instead of the usual group hangout, it was just the two of us walking back toward downtown. The city was starting to cool off for fall, leaves crunching underfoot, that crispness in the air that makes you want to pull your jacket tighter, but also just breathe it all in. We talked about the meeting, the usual frustrations about turnout, and how sometimes it felt like an uphill battle. But underneath, there was an undercurrent of something else, a kind of quiet anticipation neither of us said out loud. We took a detour through this little park, the kind with old benches and twinkly string lights wrapped around the trees. It was almost empty, except for a few scattered couples and joggers, and the glow from the street lamps made everything feel soft and calm. Jamie stopped and looked over at me, this half-smile playing on his lips. "So, what's your plan for the weekend? Apart from saving the world, of course." I laughed, brushing a stray leaf off my jacket. "Honestly, I was thinking maybe a lazy day, catch up on some reading. But now, I'm not so sure." He tilted his head, waiting. "Want to make it interesting?" I said, a little challenge in my voice. "Come over. We can cook something terrible, watch dumb movies, and I'll try not to burn the kitchen down." Jamie's smile widened. "That sounds dangerously fun." "I'm in." That was easy, wasn't it? Like we'd skipped all the awkward first date stuff and jumped straight into something real. We walked the rest of the way in comfortable silence, hands brushing, until I finally reached out and took his hand. He didn't pull away, just gave mine a little squeeze. Later that night, in Jamie's tiny but cozy apartment, we made a mess of spaghetti and talked through the soundtrack to our lives. Shitty pop songs that made us laugh, old mixtapes from his high school days, and a few new discoveries. At one point, Jamie put on this slow song, something he said was his guilty pleasure, and we just sat close on the couch, the kind of close that feels like home. Somewhere between the second bowl of pasta and a disastrous attempt at making a homemade dessert, the conversation turned to the future. I asked Jamie what he saw for himself, not just with the protests or the cause, but everything else. Life, love, happiness. He paused, looking thoughtful. Honestly, I haven't thought that far ahead in a long time, probably because I was too busy just trying to survive the present. I nodded, feeling that too. Same here. But maybe it's okay to start dreaming a little. Jamie looked at me then, really looked like he was searching for something in my eyes. What's something you're dreaming about? I thought about it and said, finding someone who makes me feel like I'm not alone in the fight. Someone who shows up, even when it's hard. He smiled softly, and his hand found mine again. Sounds like you already have someone. That night ended with a quiet kiss, slow and sure, the kind that promises more without needing to say it out loud. It was maybe the best moment I hadn't been expecting. But real life doesn't pause for perfect moments. The next few weeks brought new challenges. Work stress, family drama, and the usual chaos that kept trying to pull me away. Jamie had his own battles too, including some tough conversations with his family that left him raw. There were moments when we both got frustrated, when the weight of everything felt like too much. One afternoon, after a particularly rough call with his mom who still couldn't quite accept him, Jamie showed up at my place looking exhausted. He collapsed on the couch and just stared at the ceiling. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I'm tired of fighting all the time." I sat down beside him, hand on his knee. "You don't have to fight alone." He laughed bitterly. "I know, but sometimes it's hard to believe that. We stayed like that for a long time, just holding space for each other without trying to fix anything." And in that silence, I realized something important. Love isn't just about the good times or the easy conversations. It's about being there when everything feels like it's falling apart. A few days later, we went to another protest, this time bigger than ever, with hundreds of people chanting and marching. I looked over at Jamie as we walked side by side, and even with the noise and the crowd, it felt like we were in our own little bubble. Stronger together. Afterwards, we grabbed a late-night coffee and sat on the curb, tired but alive. "Hey," Jamie said, nudging me. "Thanks for sticking around." "For showing up." I smiled. "Always. You're worth it. And maybe that's what it's all about. Showing up. Not just for the world, but for each other. Because sometimes that's the bravest thing you can do." After that night on the curb, things didn't suddenly become perfect. Life rarely works that way. But Jamie and I had settled into this quiet rhythm, this understanding that we were in it together, even when the world felt like it was doing its best to shake us apart. One Saturday, a few weeks later, he invited me over for a DIY protest sign workshop, which turned out to be an elaborate excuse to hang out and be creative. His apartment was littered with poster boards, markers, glitter glue, which I swore was going to end in disaster, and a playlist that jumped from punk anthems to acoustic ballads. We were both terrible at arts and crafts, but that was the point. It was more about the company than the signs. At some point, while I was struggling to spell out "healthcare is a human right" without my letters looking like they'd been drawn by a toddler, Jamie laughed and tossed me a marker. "You're hopeless," he teased, grinning. Yeah, but at least I'm trying." He shrugged, then got serious for a second. "I'm glad you're here. I don't always say it, but having you around makes all this feel less lonely." I looked up from my disastrous sign, surprised by how much that hit me. Same here. We fell into this comfortable silence, working side by side, occasional jokes and shared glances. It was easy, the kind of easy you don't find often with people. Like, being around Jamie was the one place I could just be me, no edits, no filters. Later, when we took a break, Jamie curled up on the couch and pulled his phone out. "Hey, I want to show you something." He played me a video of a small protest somewhere else, people chanting, holding signs, a kid dancing in the street to an upbeat song. The energy was infectious. "See that?" Jamie said, eyes shining. "It's what we're building toward, little by little." I nodded, feeling a swell of something fierce and hopeful. "Yeah, we're not just making noise, we're making change." He smiled, and then the conversation drifted to more personal things, the kind that feel risky but necessary. He told me about the last time he tried to come out to his brother, the way the words got tangled, the silence that followed. I shared my own stories, the moments I'd hidden who I was to avoid disappointing anyone. There was no judgment, just honesty. And it made me realize how much trust had grown between us. That night, after I left Jamie's place, I walked home under a sky full of stars, feeling something unfamiliar but good, like things were finally moving forward, slowly but surely. But then, life threw a curveball. A week later, Jamie got some bad news. His job, a part-time gig he'd counted on to make ends meet, was being cut. It wasn't just about the money. It felt like another door closing, another piece of stability slipping away. I could see it in his eyes. The worry, the frustration. We sat in my apartment, the weight of it hanging between us like an unspoken question. "I don't know how I'm going to manage," Jamie admitted quietly. "Rent's coming up, and I've already been scraping by." I wanted to say something helpful, reassuring, but all I could do was reach across the couch and hold his hand. "We'll figure it out. Together." He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment, I thought I saw relief. Like maybe he didn't have to carry it all alone. In the days that followed, the reality of bills and job hunting settled in, but so did this strange determination. Jamie started applying everywhere he could, and I pitched in where I could, helping with resumes, making calls, even sharing what little savings I had. It wasn't glamorous. There were times when we'd sit on the floor, surrounded by rejection emails and unpaid bills, feeling the weight of it all like a tidal wave. But still, we didn't give up. One night, exhausted and frustrated, Jamie looked at me and said, "You know, I didn't think things could get worse, but having you here makes it bearable." I smiled, heart pounding. "You're stuck with me, whether you like it or not." He laughed and leaned his head on my shoulder. In that messy, chaotic moment, I realized something important. Love isn't about perfect plans or easy answers. It's about holding on when everything else feels like it's falling apart. And now, as we're sitting here, figuring out how to keep moving forward, I'm more certain than ever that Jamie is the one I want by my side. Not just for protests or victories, but for all the battles in between. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is show up. Not just for the world, but for each other. Months passed, and while the struggle didn't magically disappear, something shifted between Jamie and me. He found a new job, nothing fancy, but enough to keep the lights on, and I landed a small grant through campus to help with my studies. It wasn't a fairy tale fix, but it was progress, and that felt like a victory. One quiet evening, we found ourselves back at that little park with the twinkly string lights, the same place where we'd walked after that community meeting. The city hummed softly around us, the kind of calm that comes after a storm. Jamie pulled his jacket a little tighter around his shoulders, then reached out and took my hand. "You know," he said, voice low and steady, "I was scared when this all started, scared I'd be alone in it, but having you, it changed everything." I squeezed his hand gently. "You're not alone anymore, and neither am I." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the leaves drift down like lazy confetti. It felt like we'd come full circle, from two people standing almost alone on that cold street corner to something real and steady. "I don't know what the future holds," I said finally, "but I want to face it with you." Jamie smiled, that slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Me too. No matter what." There, under the soft glow of the lights with the city breathing around us, I realized that showing up for a protest, for a cause, for each other, was the bravest thing we'd done. And it was just the beginning. Because sometimes, love isn't fireworks or perfect moments. It's standing side by side through the quiet and the chaos, the wins and the setbacks. It's the shared hope that, maybe, together, things can be better. And right then, holding Jamie's hand, I believed that more than ever.